I just feel like I wanted something that everyone could just wear and feel normal again, because, the pain points are you're worried that you're going to pee through your pants. You're worried that you're going to stink.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Randy Cook, and before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everyone that our podcast is produced by MD Coaches, a company dedicated to empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. And before we get into my conversation with my interview guest today, I want to tell you a little bit about Contract Diagnostics. This is a firm 100% dedicated to physician contract reviews. They provide a service that all physician families will need at least once in their careers, and most likely a few additional times as well. What makes this company impressive is that they've helped over 10,000 physicians understand not only what they're signing, but what risks they're taking for their family. All contracts are reviewed by an in-house attorney and presented in a simplified way back to you, using custom documentation, compensation data, and working outside normal business hours. They make it easy for you. All packages are flat rate priced, so you know what you'll pay right up front. Residents and fellows can even make interest-free payments over time. So look them up at drpodcastnetwork.com/contract diagnostics, or give them a call at 888-574-5526. Well, my interview guest today is Dr. Jessica Lubahn. She is a urologist in Portland, Oregon. Interestingly, early in her life, Dr. Lubahn wanted to be anything but a physician because she had so many physician relatives, but ultimately it was a physician relative that was her inspiration. She has had not only a successful practice in Portland, she's also the inventor of a new incontinence garment that we'll talk about in the interview as well. So now let's hear that conversation. And I am delighted today to be speaking with Dr. Jessica Lubahn, who is a urologist out in the Portland, Oregon area. And I want to thank you for being here. It's great to have you on the show today.
And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So what we're going to do, Jessica, is start where we always start, at the beginning. And I'm always fascinated, because the story seems to be different with everybody, about where the influences came from that got you interested in medicine. And first of all, am I correct that you grew up in the LA area out on the West Coast?
That's correct.
And your entire childhood there, or did you come in from someplace else? Or?
No, my entire childhood in LA.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So back to the question, when did you realize that you had an interest in medicine, and where did it come from?
Well, I've had a lot of medical doctors in my family, and that's why when I grew up, I actually did not want to be a doctor at all. I absolutely did not want to be a doctor. My grandpa was a pediatrician, and I thought he was great. I loved him to death, but he worked until he was 80 years old. He said he used to see 100 patients a day.
Wow.
And he had this phenomenal following. I mean, he practiced mainly in Taiwan, and then they moved to Japan, and then the end of his career, he actually practiced in Japan. But in LA, we'd run into people that were his patients when they were growing up, and so it was pretty remarkable
Really, I
then
bet.
to have people who actually knew my grandparents.
Yeah.
And then my aunt and uncle, who are basically my second set of parents, we always say we were, raised by this huge community. My sister and I feel like we had two sets of parents, and
Yeah.
my uncle was a neurosurgeon, my aunt was an anesthesiologist, and so they were heavy influences. My mom was not a doctor, but her initials were MD, so she said she was effectively a doctor. And then my sister who was 14 months older than me, always said that she's always wanted to be a doctor from the time I could remember. She always wanted to be a doctor. And so since I always followed in her footsteps and she always did great, she always was a superstar, I wanted to distinguish myself as not my sister. And so I absolutely did not want to go into medicine.
You were really looking for some way to differentiate yourself
Exactly.
from your siblings and your relatives, and what other things did you think about?
Well, when I was in college, I actually wanted to go into finance. So I was actually an econ major. And so I thought I would go into finance, or I would go into one of the, the harder, I guess you could say, harder sciences. So I didn't think I would do anything so clinical.
So let me make sure that the audience understands where we are here. You actually you did your undergraduate work at Yale.
Correct.
So you moved from one coast to the other, and
right.
and you went out to New Haven thinking that you were going to major in economics.
Yeah. Well, actually, I went to Yale thinking that I would be a math major of all things.
Aha.
I don't know why. I felt that college would be a place where I would find myself and I would figure it all out there. I would find something that I would truly love. And at that time, I thought math was something that I enjoyed doing, that I thought that I really got. And so I thought, well, I could be a math major and then figure it out from there. In college, finance was one of the main things everyone went into, and it seemed to have a good marriage of complicated math and some financial reward. And so it seemed like a good path to follow at that time. So
you hadn't really made a big commitment to any long-term goal at that point?
No, I hadn't. I mean, I think because there was so many doctors in my family, medicine was always in the back of my mind, but I didn't think it was something that I would pursue myself.
Yeah.
But I always thought it was very interesting, but I think I was definitely influenced by, my grandpa, and seeing that he found something that he could do until he was 80. So, everyone always says to you, if you do something you love, you'll feel like you've never worked a day in your life. So I guess that always stuck out to me, that you could love something so much that you would keep doing that at 80. So,
and then the other thing that I noticed in your CV is that in addition to economics, you had a fairly strong arts background at Yale. Is that correct?
So I got a bachelor
for your
of
undergrad
arts.
Major. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But in the end, I think it was doing all these interviews and meeting, when you're interviewing for these big firms and you're going to dinner and you're talking to people who are spending all summer at various firms. I had an existential crisis at a young age. I don't know if I was burnt out then or what I was feeling then, but I had this momentary point in my life where I thought, well, when I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to be really proud of, and what will I achieve? And at that time, I would always talk about these things with my uncle, and my uncle said, you got to listen to that voice, because as you get older and you get to my age, that's going to mean more and count for more than however much money you make or whatever you do, that feeling that you've done something good and made a difference is what you're gonna be really proud of when you're at the end of your life.
Pretty good advice.
Yeah, it was really good advice.
And how far along were you in your undergrad work when you came to that epiphany?
I was probably a junior. And at that point because I had to decide what I was going to do in the summer, whether or not I was going to get a job, get an internship, or do bench research, or it was sort of that crossroads of, so far I had a pretty diversified course load where I could still do anything. And so at that point, my uncle told me to just, come to Oregon. So they were in Oregon at the time. They're still in Oregon, but he said, you just come and shadow a few professions, come shadow a few doctors. I know you don't want to be a doctor, but come shadow and see what it's like.
What a great idea.
And so it was really nice. He set me up with a radiation oncologist, an allergist. My aunt's an anesthesiologist. She had me watch some cases with her. But I think I really disappointed her at the time because my aunt and uncle were real night owls. So we had stayed up really late. They always ate dinner really late at 11 p.m. And so we were up all night, and she had to work the next morning. So I went to work with her the next morning at 5 o'clock. And I remember I don't know, I think I was tired, but I felt really nauseous while I was watching I think a lap chole, and I had to go lie down. So I said, I don't feel good right now. I don't know what's wrong, but I don't feel good right now. So I was just lying down in the doctor's lounge, and the phone rings, and it was my aunt, and she was like, "Get up! What are you doing?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't think we slept last night. I think we slept like 3 hours. I felt a little nauseous. I didn't want to pass out, but she made me worried momentarily that I was not going to be cut out for this."
So she thought that perhaps there was something about the hour of the day or something that you saw
she thought
in the operating room?
Oh, she thought I was just weak.
I see. Yeah.
My aunt, I have to give her credit for, my aunt and my mom are very strong women, and they don't like any displays of any kind of weakness, no matter what it can be. So she would talk about, if I ever complain even to this day about call, she would talk about this era where she would she would take 3 nights in a row, just stack her call and just work continuously for 3 days, and then say, then I got the whole week off. It was like, wow, you are a machine. But definitely she's definitely from a different era, but truly remarkable when I think about all that she went through.
It sounds like she might have been of a vintage similar to mine, where the joke was fatigue is simply a sign of weakness, and that kind of macho sort of thing.
Absolutely. And then she was also a woman power. So if anyone can do it, you can do it. So just get up and do it, and don't let anyone say you can't, and don't think you can't. That's everything's a state of mind. And to this day, even age to her is a state of mind. She's almost 80, and she can still plank for longer than I can. So she still looks like she's 60. She's pretty amazing, but
so that tough love really had a very positive influence.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think I definitely don't think in my childhood I ever questioned whether or not I would be able to or allowed to do anything. It was always a question of whether I had it in me to go after it. Yeah. And I have 2 little girls now, and I don't know how to instill that kind of that kind of grit in them. And I hope, I hope that, in having those women like that as your examples, I think is very, definitely really shaped me growing up.
And so I gather, or I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, did you have to make any changes to your curriculum at Yale? Did you change any of the courses that you were taking in order to better prepare yourself to get in medical school?
Yeah, I did. In the last 2 years, I had to take a lot of the prerequisites. So originally I had taken a lot more math and econ classes. But by the time I was a junior, I pretty much already finished my econ major. So I had actually gone in and I was going to do a econ and math major, I guess. And so I dropped the math part. And so I was pretty much already done with my econ part. So I just spent the last 2 years doing prerequisites. So I had to take the chemistry and bio.
From other people that I've spoken to, it sounds like that recommendation for the undergraduate years has not changed much, and that is that you're actually encouraged not to concentrate so much on the science because you're going to get plenty of science when you get to medical school. Is that sort of the message that you were getting?
I think so. I think what was nice at Yale was that there was no, I mean, there was sort of categories that you had to meet and you had to do X number of courses from each category, but there was no pathway to follow. I mean, it was almost easier once I decided to go to medical school, just because then it laid out my coursework a little easier. Otherwise, you feel kind of haphazard. You could take anything pretty much. And so it gave you kind of a direction of what you had to take. So I was able to finish that. And I think, at the time I just felt that I needed to, medicine was still something that would make me feel fulfilled at the end. I think I decided, I also took the MCATs and did well. And so I thought, well, that's got to be a sign. Maybe I should go. So,
remember medical school? You were confident, studious, hardworking, and you learned what to expect in all manner of patient care. Then reality struck. Regulations, expenses, staff management, and administration. Is this what we signed up for? Stress on the verge of burnout, no time for family, or the reason we got into medicine. Helping people. What are the options when you're afraid you're in the wrong career? Transition, teach, quit? What if there was another way? MD Coaches can help. We're a team of medical professionals with a century of experience in the clinical and business sides of medicine. More importantly, MD Coaches has been where you are, stressed and trying to navigate a world school didn't prepare us for. MD Coaches is your mentor, your confidant, to help you make your practice shine, navigate administrations, and successfully lead staff and projects. Or if you're ready to transition, we can help there too. MD Coaches is doctors helping doctors. Visit our website to receive a free, no-obligation consultation. Go to mymdcoaches.com/RX. That's mymdcoaches.com/RX. Isn't it time someone else was on your side? Don't let the business of being a doctor stop you from doing what you love. That site again, mymdcoaches.com/RX. Visit us today.
Physician Outlook is a new magazine platform built for physicians and by physicians, and it's designed to showcase unique physician talents. Sometimes it might be clinical talents, but mostly it's about the intersection between clinical and non-clinical talents, whether it be writing or painting or cooking, or maybe even making a political statement in front of a state and local governing body, or even at the nation's capital, and dozens of other things. It's available online and in print. It's visually stunning on all of its platforms. I promise it's really unique in terms of physician lifestyle magazines. I think you'll really enjoy it. We think it's just the thing to fill your prescription for success. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook magazine amplifies the voice of any doctor who has something to say, and also uniquely engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get $20 off an annual subscription fee by visiting rxforsuccesspodcast.com/physician outlook. When you made that decision that you were going to apply to medical school, did you do like a lot of people and apply to a dozen or so places, or did you have one picked out, or
No, I
how did you
applied
decide where
everywhere.
you go to? Oh, did you really? Yeah.
Yeah, I applied to a lot of different places. And my sister had just applied the year, my sister had just gone to apply to med school. And so she ended up going to Stanford. So I had sort of an idea of the route or what I needed to do.
So how'd you pick Washington University?
Well,
The one in St. Louis.
Yeah, the one in St. Louis, WashU in St. Louis. Actually, that was the place that my uncle did his surgical internship, and so he's always talked really highly about Barnes Jewish. It was rated highly. When I was in my senior year of college, I also met my husband, who was only applying to Texas schools so we met on one of our med school interviews, but it was also
how romantic.
I know. He did not interview me, which is often the next question, but we were both applying to med school at the same time. And so I met him on my very first med school interview. And so he had only applied to Texas schools in Texas. And so St. Louis was actually the closest school. And it was a good school. It's the closest to him. I didn't want to, at the time we had just met, I didn't want to pick a school based on someone that I had just met. But it worked out where it was still within driving distance. He ended up going to UT Southwestern in Dallas. So still within driving distance of Dallas. I think at the time also there was this possibility that I had been interviewing for, one of those full rides to WashU has a bunch of merit scholarships as well. And so I was trying to get one of those and didn't end up getting one of those, but
I'm kind of fascinated with the number of people that I talk to that have spouses who are also physicians who managed to train in different locations and they made it work. So obviously the next question is, did that put any significant strain on the relationship that you were aware of, or did it make it easier, or
both?
Okay. Let's hear the story.
So it was so our relationship didn't start off easily because he was in Houston and I was in New Haven at the time. And I have a very traditional family, and so when they met him for the first time and realized that we were in very faraway cities, of course my mom was beside herself. Like, this guy could say whatever he wants, you don't even know. Is he even applying to med school? You don't even know. And I was like, well, I did meet him at an interview, so that is verified.
That sounds like a very mom thing to say.
Yeah.
So
it did. Yeah. And it didn't start off easy from that perspective, because it just sounds absolutely crazy that you could start a relationship from long distance. So we went to medical school far apart, and the first time we actually lived in the same city, we were married. So that was a little bit scary. Yeah, I never thought I was a person that would where a long distance relationship would work. But I think in the context of medical school, where you're so busy anyway, it's hard to, you really don't, your social activity is almost limited to other med students. It actually worked out well in the sense that even though we were at different medical schools, the curriculum is very similar. And so we would visit each other at least once a month. And we had, even though we were at different places, we had similar tasks that we needed to do. And so and the other part of it was when your other significant others also going through the same thing, they also understand the time commitment. So I don't think I could have dated anyone distance that wasn't a medical student, just because
that makes sense.
They wouldn't understand why you couldn't go to things and needed so much time apart. But we were very sympathetic of each other, just because we understood, you're on rotation, you're not going to be able to call, you need to study for this test.
Wow.
We could study for the step ones together,
In
so
that
it ended up,
regard, it sounds like a very good match.
yeah, it actually worked out really well. And I think what I also liked about it at the time was that every day you kind of choose to be together, because it's very easy to not be together when you're distant, but every day you have your own life that's apart from each other. And I think in some relationships, your life becomes difficult to distinguish from that person. But for us, we always knew we had our own lives, but every day you kind of choose each other again. So I thought that was the fact that it worked out, that was a good sign.
That's a really great story. I really appreciate you sharing something that personal with us, because it's a good thing for a lot of young professionals to hear, I think. But I want to I want to get a little bit of an idea about what your feeling was once you got into medical school. You've told us that it's not something that you wanted to do since the day you were born or anything like that. But once you got there, were you pretty sure you were where you belonged, or what was the reaction?
I'm never sure I'm anywhere I belong, so I don't know about that. But and my husband says the same. He says, no matter what you've gone into, you're always going to question whether or not you went into the right thing. So at this point, I don't regret that I went through medical school, but I do see that I could have done a lot of things and would have been just as happy. I love medical school, though. I loved my medical school class, and my friends from medical school are still some of my closest friends. And I think when you're stuck with a small class and you go through that together, it's hard to take that away, and it's hard to experience anything like that. So I think that part of medical school where you go through so many ups and downs, but you do it with such a small community, I think it's hard to have anything that keeps you together for that long. And so those are still some of my closest friends. So from that aspect of it, that I love medical school.
Yeah. And you didn't really have that experience that I hear so much about. Oh my Lord, I didn't think I would survive basic science, but once I saw a patient, life got better. It was good from the beginning for you.
Well, yeah, I think, my husband and I talk about it. Well, despite how poor we were and how busy we were, it was a pretty good time. I mean, we were young, we had no responsibilities, we didn't have kids. You don't realize actually how much freedom you have at that period in your life.
So true.
Whether or not, WashU, I as a result, I loved my med school classmates there. I thought I had a great education there. The people I met there were really top notch. But if I never go back to St. Louis again in my life, I would be totally okay with that.
I see.
The Central West End was really nice, but there were definitely times in St. Louis where you think, what am I doing here? My first day of med school, when I was walking to class, I just got goosed from behind, like just full hand goosed. And I was like, okay, that's odd. And, by some guy, riding bike on a bicycle. And then on the way home, I remember this was my first day of med school. A car pulled up right as I was walking right next to me. And there was older white male that he looked like he could have been like a friend's dad. And he said, "Hey, I need directions." He had a map on his lap, and he was like, "Hey, can you help me with directions?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know St. Louis, but I'll try." And then he was like, "Hey, have you heard of the show Girls Gone Wild?" And I was like, "No." "Yes, I've heard of it." He said, "Well, have you ever seen a guy gone wild?" He lifts up the map, and he's got a full erection. I was like, "Okay, that's."
Wow.
And I was like, this was the first day. And then a couple of my med school classmates were robbed. And so I was like, oh my God, I don't know. That was the last time anything like that happened. But on that first day, I was like, wow, where did I land? Where am I?
Yeah.
Like, what just happened?
Not the best first impression that I've ever heard of.
It was not a good first impression. Wow. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I made the right choice at that time.
So you were okay moving to Dallas when the time came, huh?
Yeah, I was okay moving to Dallas.
And so let's talk about that. Did you know when you matched for your postgraduate training that urology was where you were headed, or what was the state of your plan at that point?
Post-medical school?
Yes. Post-medical school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had, so urology has its own match now, or I guess it still does. And so you match specifically into urology, and then the general surgery part is sort of just wrapped in it with it. So
right.
It was kind of a complicated, just because my husband and my husband decided to go into ophthalmology. So we picked a two specialty where you actually couldn't match together. So that made interviewing and really challenging.
Yeah.
Really, really challenging. That part was probably the worst part of our relationship, where we had to sit down with we had gone and interviewed everywhere, and we sat down with our list, and our top 5 were different. We didn't have a single program that was the same in our top 5.
That you agreed on?
Yeah, that we agreed on.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we sat there looking at So we sat there looking at each other like, well, what gives? You come into my program? So yeah, it was a really tricky time, actually. And so we sort of had to we ended up looking at which programs in the top 5 had at least a decent program in the other person's specialty. And then also the likelihood we could get there, that we could match together.
Yeah.
And so in order to figure out if we could match together, we had to go someplace that we had a back channel into, so where we could have someone check in to see if we were actually going to be ranked to match. And
wow, the intrigue.
So, yeah, it was a challenge. It was not a fun time, but it worked out. I
can understand how that would really be challenging, and not to cast any aspersions on urology by any stretch of the imagination, but I am aware that the competitiveness in ophthalmology is fairly profound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those people feel very fortunate if they match anywhere, and yet you guys were colluding to make sure that you ended up in the same place and succeeded.
And then my husband's also he and it was really hard, because definitely places where I wanted to really go, I had chairmans call me from those places, and then vice versa for my husband. But when it didn't line up, it was just heartbreaking. And so, when you both have your heart set on a program, and then you both realize that neither of you are going to go to that program. Yeah, because it was the first time in my life I'd ever had to really consider not thinking about me the whole way, I guess,
Yeah.
or just prioritizing what I wanted. And so I remember that when we actually so we both ended up doing residency at UT Southwestern, and it was interesting because when my husband was a medical student, his first summer there, he actually worked on a research project with a urologist, and so he actually knew a few faculty from the urology department, actually having written a paper with one of the urologists there. So random. But it's funny because when I first met my chairman, I did not like him. We did not get along. I did not think the interview went well. And so when we were sitting down, and he was saying, this is, if we really want to do the next 5 years in the same place, we have to rank, UT Southwestern first. And I cried. I actually cried, and I said, I cannot have that man as my chairman. Like, I cannot have him as my chairman. Wow. And later on, I found out I love him to death. I had the greatest chairman in the world. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better chairman. Now I realize that he just does not interview well. And even when I was a resident, I said, you need to back off because you do not come across well. And I told him, when I decided to come here, I cried because I didn't want you as my chairman. And he said, I didn't want you either, but we wanted your husband. I said, okay, touche. But here we are. Guess it worked out.
That's a great story.
Yeah, to this day, I still text him. He's been amazingly supportive, and I couldn't have asked for a better mentor. But you just never know.
Sounds like
it worked out.
So the residency experience for you, despite your trepidations, it sounds like it was fairly rewarding for you.
Yeah, I had a great residency. Yeah. I mean, not, as you can imagine, not all of it. There were hard times, and
sure.
But in the end, I liked who I worked with. I liked my faculty. I thought we had really good training. We did spend 1 year apart after he ended up doing fellowship at Bascom Palmer my chief year. So urology is a year longer than ophthalmology. And right. So he did a year in Miami for his cornea fellowship. So,
but you all were married at that point?
We were married at that point. Yeah. So we got married before we started residency. So, we got married. And again, my conservative parents, I did not handle that well because my parents had come to my husband's graduation, and we had already, so my parents were in LA. We didn't tell them we were starting to look for jobs, and did not tell them also that we were not looking at jobs in LA. And so, in one night, my mom finds out, his program, my husband's program director made like, oh, in Jordan, he's going to fellowship in Bascom Palmer in Miami. Then they're moving to Portland. And I was like, oh, oops. Like, I have not told my mom yet. Please do not. That was, my mom's face was like, Portland. And then during the graduation reception, his co-resident Larry came up to my mom and was like, hi, I'm going to be your daughter's roommate next year. And my mom was like, you are going to live with a man? I was like, yes, I'm just going to live with Larry for a year just because cost. And my mom was like, that's a terrible idea. And she said, well, who is Jordan living with? And I said, Alyssa.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, it was terrible. I did not handle that well. Yeah. So at dinner, my mom was just a pile of tears. She was like, this is the end of your marriage. Terrible idea. But
wow. You
it
really
worked
got
out.
some you've got some memories there.
Yeah. It's funny.
Well, now the one thing that I would like to talk to you about, at least briefly, is something that I bet a lot of our audience is interested to hear, and that is, well, actually, I'm not sure, but by the time you made your decision to go into urology, I'm sure the prejudice was not as profound against females in urology as it was when I trained.
Yeah, that was
literally
bad.
half a century ago. But so there was actually some anti-female prejudice at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even now, I think there are only 10% of the board certified urologists are female. So it's still low, but nothing like it was for sure. Yeah. I mean, even when I chose it, I got a lot of comments for going into it, even though it was already becoming more common. I remember my chairman at WashU at the time, he said, well, you're going into urology. That's interesting. Who is this fiance of yours? We want to meet him. Because when you go home at night, he knows when you go home at night, you're going to think, wow, he is the man or he is not the man.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
he was like,
I can't believe I'm hearing this.
I know. So he would say these things in the OR, like, let's call him up and see what he thinks about this. And
oh my.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
But before we move on from this topic, I am interested in where the fascination with urology began for you. I mean, clearly it was a decision that you made somewhat in advance of graduating from medical school, obviously, if you were making plans. So where did, I mean, you were in medical school, you were around urologists in medical school. There couldn't have been very many women around. So what was it, do you think, that drew you to that area?
I think a lot of it was sure luck of the draw. When I was my first summer in St. Louis, and I had to pick a lab to work at, I actually ended up working in a lab of a urologist. It just happened to be, one of the 5 people that responded to my emails, and it was a discrete project that I felt like I could do in a summer, and so I ended up in a urology, not because I was interested in urology, but just because that's sort of how it turned out. And then in medical school, I actually thought that I wanted to be a plastic surgeon because the chairman of plastics at WashU was Susan McKinnon, who is this remarkable peripheral nerve surgeon. And she did this medical school, this talk for med students about peripheral nerves, where she did all these nerve transfers, and it was just these amazing recoveries. And she was a mom of 4, chairman of the department. And so when I looked at her, I thought, I want to be you. That's who I want to be. And then she was super supportive of women going into surgery, no matter what surgery it was. And so I spent a summer or 2 in her lab, and she was really, really, she was a real advocate for women going into surgical specialties. And so I think I always had in my mind after that, I wanted to do surgery of some sort. I wanted something that I was, still able to have some semblance of a life as well. And so I feel like that narrowed down some of the subspecialties. I liked urology because there was a lot of technology in it. You can do really big cancer operations, to find reconstructions. You can start off really deep. You could sort of tailor your life to what portion of urology you want to be. You could be a almost purely surgical person, or you could be almost completely office based. So I like that there was a range of options for that. And then I think of the attendings that I really connected with, I felt like I really gelled well with the urologist. I think our humors got along well. And so it just seemed like the support I got and the community that I thought that it felt like a place that it would belong. And I think the part that there weren't a lot of women in urology really attracted me to it. At the time, I looked at some statistic that they said, I always had this fear that when I come out, I wouldn't be busy, or I'd have to spend all these years building a practice. But when you looked at the statistics, there were only, at that time, I think 400 women who were board certified in urology, and then there were another 400 in training, but it was still remarkably low. The number of urologists per capita was like 1 per 70,000, and like the ideal number was supposed to be 1 per 40,000. So I thought, well, I'm going to be busy right off the bat, so I don't have to spend all these years building a practice. And I don't know. I just thought that if I were a female urologist, it'd make me more special right off the bat. So,
well, yeah. It sounds like you
so I thought
put a
about
significant amount of thought into it. And the interesting thing is that urology changed. And I don't have to tell you this, but certainly when I trained, I'm going to guess, I don't have any true numbers on this, but I'm going to guess that somewhere between 70 and 80% of urology practice back in those days revolved around the male prostate. Either malignant disease or benign disease. And because of new medical approaches, that changed a lot. So it sounds like you couldn't have possibly come into it at a better time.
I think so.
All right. So, and so when you finished your training, you made this decision to move up to Portland and private practice, and that brings up another question that if I've got this right, by the time you finished your residency, it looks like you had about 21 peer-reviewed publications, and if I just looked at that CV without any other prompting, I would have guessed that this was somebody that was going to be headed into academics. Did that ever enter your head at all?
I think so. Part of it going into academia is it would probably require me to do another fellowship. And at that point in my life, I was just ready to move on. And also it's hard enough it was already hard enough to figure out fellowship training for my husband, and then to figure out after, because we have to go everywhere together, to do another year apart would be hard. And at that point I wanted to, you're getting advanced in years. I wanted to try to have kids before I couldn't. And, the more you postpone, the harder it is. And it had been hard enough already for us. So, so I just, decided we just need to get those things taken care of as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like you really had a burning desire to be involved in this academic environment.
No, I enjoy writing, and I love the community that academia provides. But I'm also a terrible teacher. And the more I am in private practice, the more I realize I'm glad that I didn't do it, just because I'm more neurotic than I ever imagined that I would be. And, I think about residency of the different personalities that I work with. I always felt pretty confident as a resident. And I always thought, when when I have my own patients, I would never be so unreasonable and unrational, but I am completely that person. The moment someone coughs, I'm like, ugh, they've got a pneumonia. I'm exactly I'm exactly the neurotic person that I thought I wouldn't become. I am exactly full of that. And so I think I would have a really hard time letting go and, teaching someone and letting someone else do things, just that would be required in academia. So I don't now in retrospect, I don't think it would be a good fit for me just because I don't think I could let go enough for that.
Yeah, that's
But
an interesting.
and I'm also a terrible teacher, and I
Well, I
know
want to know
that.
some more about that. Why do you say that you're a terrible teacher?
I just I don't think I'm patient enough, and one of the jobs I've had throughout in high school, I was always a tutor. I always tested really well, and so people would pay me a lot of money to tutor their kids in math and whatever, SATs or whatever they thought that their kids needed. And so I would tutor now I think about it, and they would pay me a lot of money to tutor their kids. And I did not do a good job in retrospect. I mean, I remember trying to teach fractions to a sixth grader, and I pulled my brain every different way I can teach fractions. And I remember just stopped and I looked at the kid and was like, I don't know how else to explain this. You're just going to have to figure it out.
You know what, Jessica, if I can salve your conscience a bit, I frankly I don't think that anyone can teach mathematics.
Yeah.
My impression of that, because it's something that I had difficulty with, and I think it's one of those things unless you're dealing with a really receptive brain that can think in those concepts, it's simply not teachable. And so I'm going to absolve you of your guilt of not being able to teach math, and you can take that off your list of worries.
My husband also did Teach for America. And he was actually, teacher of the year. And I see how, patient he is with my kids. And it's like, wow. I mean, that's what a good teacher looks like. Like, I am not a good teacher.
Well,
he's like patient and organized, and
let's take you to another territory of which there's one other thing I want to cover before we get into your prescriptions for success is that you are apparently a bit of an inventor, and you've invented an incontinent garment that's especially designed for women. And why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so as a urologist, I see men and women who, on a daily basis, with incontinence, and a lot of these, especially the highly functional and younger, and there's some the younger women and who are really frustrated and embarrassed by incontinence, and it really limits their activity. It really impacts their lives. So they talk about, their bladder rules their life. Everywhere they go, they think about where the bathrooms are. They talk about having a relationship with their bladder. And this happens even in men, and this happens even in older individuals as well. But I think the part that really struck me was since I treat this all day long, I'm, doing Botox and surgery and medications, nerve stimulations. There are all these things that I'm doing for these patients, especially the severe cases. But what caught my attention were the less severe cases, the people that have really, really mild issues on the scale of things, but are extremely bothered by them. And you feel like as a physician that you're minimizing when you say, no, I'm not going to operate on you. You feel like
Right.
you're minimizing their complaints because they're so bothered by it. But, it's hard to, from my standpoint, justify the risk for really minimal issues from the scale of things. Also, so and then it also impacted, members of my family who've had prostate cancer and surgery. From a urologist standpoint, I'm fortunate that everyone's had a really, really really good results. They are not really wearing pads. They're cancer free. And so from a urologist standpoint, those were really good results. But then in talking to even just family members about like the pain and embarrassment and shame that they felt going through the recovery process, and even years after their surgery, with what was seemingly fairly minimal leakage, it really shocked me like how much even these little leakages really impacted people. And so I just got to thinking, like, what is it about leakage that is so shameful? One of it is the stigma of leaking. And I think it's, for my husband and I, this is how I sort of think of it. We've had issues with infertility. And in the beginning, we were super embarrassed by it, never talked about it, didn't want to. And then one day we were just like, you know what, this is just exhausting. We're just going to tell, well, we can't do it because we're doing IVF, and then it was just, It was so liberating actually. And what was liberating too is then you realize that everybody else is too, like all of a sudden, all my friends, or it's as a lot of my friends are older and career driven, and so I have a substantial number of friends who are going through it as well, but no one ever talked about it until we were just like, look, we're going through IVF. So, and so suddenly, actually, we had all these friends talking to us about it, and then some of my friends, we went through it together, and so it just made it so much better. So I feel like the same thing with incontinence, where if everyone just realized how common it was and how it's not so shameful, especially in women who've had kids, you just push this bowling ball out and now you're embarrassed, you pee a little, that should be a badge of, it should be a badge of honor,
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that there are a number of significant medical issues,
yeah,
but if they're not fatal or potentially fatal,
exactly,
they don't really get taken seriously, and they can be an object of shame. That's fascinating to me.
Yep. And so, I just felt like that part, the stigma surrounding incontinence, the shame part, should be addressed from, an individual standpoint, but also the societal standpoint as well. If we just all talked about it and realized how common it was, it wouldn't be so shameful, and I think even among just my mom friends, and when you ask everyone, if you ask most people, do you have incontinence? Most people will say no. But the moment you say, I can't jump on the trampoline, everyone's like, nope. So, no, but we're not jumping, it's like, well, everyone has a little bit of issue. And it's almost the rarity for someone, it's almost the rarity for a mom friend to say, what are you talking about? It's pretty uncommon for them to not get it right away.
So your invention, it sounds like, came about because of a really intense degree of empathy that you had with these people, which is a great credit to you.
I just feel like I wanted something that everyone could just wear and feel normal again, because the pain points are you're worried that you're going to pee through your pants. You're worried that you're going to stink. You're worried that when you're changing, you look like you're wearing a diaper. So my thought was, well, if you just made something like the pad or the diaper just look like normal underwear, or make it look and feel like something you would want to wear anyway, there's so much or shame you could just take away from it. You could bring that confidence back. And
What a great
so
idea.
so I wanted to do that. And then, there are a lot of period panties out there. They don't do a great job of holding liquids, but I feel like they've done a great job of destigmatizing women menstruating. And so I feel like if we can campaign to the same level of the awareness and destigmatizing incontinence, that would be beneficial to everyone as well.
What a great idea. And tell us, what's the name of the product?
It's called Ondrwear, ONDR wear. So the website is www.ondrwear.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook by the same handle, @Ondrwear.
And I'm gathering that you blog about this topic as well.
Yeah, as much as I can,
Yeah,
trying to.
great source of information. Mm-hmm. What a great idea, and what a credit to you that you thought about it in that way. I mean, I don't hear anything in this discussion where you said, "Gee, I woke up one day and thought I could become independently wealthy if I would just do this thing." That wasn't it at all, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like this would, if we could just, you could help so many more people. And I really, I feel like just like for periods, destigmatizing periods, for women, it's becoming slightly more acceptable. But for men, it's even more taboo. Yeah. And so I feel like there's even more work that needs to be done in that area. And so I started with women just because I feel like I can speak to women a little bit easier. I understand the population a little bit better. But I do have prototypes for men. And so I think one day could roll it all out for more widely.
Well, this is a good thing you're doing, and I want to congratulate you for following up on that interest. And I know that there are just countless of grateful people that would tell you exactly the same thing. So good for you. Listen, it has really been great talking to you. I've taken up a lot of your time, and I could go on forever. But what I would like to do at this point is get down to the business of the show, and that's your prescriptions for success. So what I'm going to do is close my mic and sit very quietly, and we're going to hear Dr. Jessica Lubahn deliver her prescriptions for success. Jessica.
Thank you. I would say my 3 prescriptions of success, especially to my younger self, would be number 1, to don't shy away or don't be afraid of failure. I've been so risk averse my whole life. I feel like you don't recognize all the opportunities that are available, and you don't realize how much more you can do being afraid of failing at them. So I think taking this, that would lead to the second prescription would be to take risks. And in doing so, don't be afraid to ask for help. I've been shocked in this process by how willing people are to help and give advice. And that has been really instrumental in, many areas of my life, but especially in a new venture like entrepreneurship where there's no clear path. Asking for help has been everything. What I've come to learn is that the worst that could happen is people say no, and in which case you're not any worse off. But I'm shocked at the number of times people say yes and they reach out to their networks, and has really allowed me to continue to push forward in various endeavors. And I think the last part, which I often forget myself, is to enjoy the process. I feel, especially my younger self, that I've always been so focused on the end. I keep thinking when when I was in grade school. When I get to high school, it's going to get better. If I could just get into college, it'll be great. When I get to med school, everything's going to be okay. I think that sort of mentality has caused me to miss so many of the times where the path has been so fun. And in retrospect now, I wish that I had taken the time to enjoy more of it. And so now I'm trying to not only enjoy the creation and the product, but enjoy the process and the learning and all the other steps to getting to the end point. So that would be my prescription.
Jessica, thank you very much for sharing your honestly earned wisdom with us. You have clearly been paying attention all throughout your professional development and your personal development, and I'm really grateful that you were willing to share that wisdom with us today. It's been an inspiration for me and for all of our listeners, I'm sure. Before we close out today, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where you can be followed, because I think a lot of people would like to know how to reach you and how to follow your product and your blogs and whatever you would like to share with us. So go ahead and let us know where you can be found.
So our Instagram and Facebook handle is at Onderwear, ONDR, wear, WEAR. Our website is www.onderwear.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Jessica. Dr. Jessica Lubahn from Portland, Oregon, outstanding urologist and inventor. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I do hope you've enjoyed my conversation today with Dr. Jessica Lubahn, and I want to thank Contract Diagnostics for helping make our show possible. Contract Diagnostics is a company that specializes in contract reviews. Specialization is something that we can all appreciate here. So, again, when you or your family have contract needs, please give them a call. They'll help you understand your contract, and they'll help you make sure it lines up with your interests and protect the assets that you covet most, your time and your family. You can find them at drpodcastnetwork.com/contract diagnostics or by phone at 888-574-5526. And that's going to bring this episode of Prescription for Success to a close. I hope you enjoyed hearing my chat with Dr. Jessica Lubahn. If you did, please visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com and let us know. We hope we earned a 5-star rating today. We really appreciate your support very much, and we hope you will consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/RX for Success podcast. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.